Rashid Ogunlari, and I'm delighted to be here with my very good friend, Mr. Adam Cox, holistic health and wellbeing coach.
Yeah.
We're here for this Sole Trader interviews, but I'm just wanting to talk to you. You're the kind of person I can speak to week in and week out, because so many issues related to health emerge. But I wanted to talk to you today particularly about the business of fitness. Fitness in business. Anybody who's their own boss needs to be healthy and they need to be fit. It strikes me that there's quite a lot of stuff that when somebody's running their business and they suddenly become busy, that all sorts of things happen whereby their fitness actually is one of the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th things on the list, rather than the first things on the list. So I wanted to come and talk to you to explore some of that, and I particularly wanted to talk to you because you have a holistic viewpoint, and it's important, mind, body and spirit. So what would your observations be, first of all, for somebody who is their own boss? Is fitness even more important than it might be otherwise?
That's an excellent question. I think it can fall down the list of priorities for a number of reasons. I think people get into business as an entrepreneur because they want to have a degree of control over what they do day in, day out, and potentially to make more money. And also there's things like making better impact and all those kind of things. Providing a business to the world that is in alignment with their values.
I'll second that.
Yeah, that's what you're all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, if, for example, health and well-being is not one of their critical values, something that absolutely in that moment has to be addressed, it's very easy for it to fall down the list. And when we're running a business, one of the primary objectives of a business is to make money. Otherwise, it dies.
Yeah.
The business dies. So that can be a kind of, in the early stages anyway, from what I've seen with clients who are in sort of an entrepreneurial part of their career, is to fight fires occasionally. Now, the thing is with fighting fires, we all need to do when we're in business occasionally, is you're actually a little better equipped to do it if you are healthier and fitter. I think the mindset would give you just a better perspective on things when you've been able to remove yourself perhaps and say, right, I need, even as basic as I need to go for a long walk around the park for an hour.
There's so much to this, isn't there, Adam? It's interesting, as you were speaking and you introduced that, and there are all sorts of examples that are coming up to me. That one is that I was with a new client the other day. He's a dancer, quite a top-level dancer actually. He had an injury a while ago. And actually he's been on a journey. Actually, he should definitely speak to you. Actually, that's the kind of thing that they do. But it's interesting. He'd said to me that actually, since he'd recuperated, actually, he was even more mindful about his health and fitness. It is literally his business. Being fit is his business. I remember when I wrote the Sole Trader book, and I was just sharing with you, there was somebody who I'd mentioned in there, and he had a heart problem. I'd rang him just by chance, telling him he was in the book, and he said, "Look, I've just been let out of hospital." Lovely guy, as you were saying, set up business for all sorts of giving kind of reasons, but he wasn't taking care of himself. His heart was literally telling him to take care of himself. I was just on the way here, bumped into a friend of mine. He'd just been told he had high blood pressure. He also runs his own business. He's his own boss. So whether you're an artist, whether you're running a small business, this stuff is really, really pronounced. Now I was just going to ask you, in a second I want to ask you personally what your take is on how you balance it yourself. I guess you've got a head start to most of us. But tell me first of all, the people who come to you, presumably they are quite a broad range of people. Many of them, some of them will be entrepreneurs, right? But some of them will also be running important positions within a business, and they also need to be fit. So I'd imagine this thing about fitness in business goes across the board for so many people who come and see you day in and day out.
Absolutely. Well, I typically work with people in the creative and lifestyle industries, and those lifestyle businesses and industries very often sole traders.
Right, yeah.
you need a copy of your book, Rash. You know, if we were to go a little deeper with this conversation, as you know, I like to sort of really get to the nitty-gritty of things. I would look at it and say that, you know, health, on the face of it, watching this, you might think, well, you know, just go for a walk, go for a run, lift some weights, eat a bit better, drink some water. That's physical components of health. What about the mental, the emotional and the spiritual components of health as well? Those are perhaps even more important than the physical components, because those are going to undermine the physical anyway if they're out of balance.
You know, when you were just saying that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's so profound what you were saying. I was just thinking, I'm not going to name names, and the time may have gone by the time people will see this, and maybe another instance. But just the week before this, somebody in a well-known pop group had to leave the pop group due to all sorts of factors. I don't know the factors, but some of it may well be exhausting. The mental, the physical, all of those factors play out. You talk about the creative industries. Part of my background is creative, and I know lots of clients of mine. They have their work requires a lot of physical energy. They're doing something very demanding. It's very mentally demanding. It's very creative. You're doing whatever you might be on TV, or you might be doing whatever you're doing. It is your spirit is part of what you're working with. And I think what you're saying there, Adam, is really powerful, because then the physical is just one aspect. And if you don't have the others, when the physical is down, you're going to be in a real amount of trouble, right?
Well, the way I explain it to clients is this. Essentially, we are all just billions, trillions of particles vibrating. Vibrating at a frequency that we label as a human being. Okay? And, I believe you've got some experience with the chakra system, the Hindu chakra system, the 7 chakras. And
for those people who don't know, you can walk us through it.
Well, a chakra in English means an energy wheel or a vortex, and basically what that looks like in a sort of Western philosophy is certain sections of the spine. So we can segment certain sections of the spine into those chakras, and each segment of the spinal column has a frequency with which it vibrates, and it actually goes along with the tone scale, so do, re, mi, all the way up to the top of the tone scale. All of the organs that are represented at that particular level of the spine also vibrate at that same frequency. And there are dominant emotions that the frequency of that emotion relates to that section of the spine. Then you've got muscles that are coordinated by that section of the spine. So if we can say that someone's out of balance in one of their energy fields, and that's something I must add as well, is the human body, the physical body is just the densest part of the human experience. There are energy fields that radiate outside of your physical body. So, first of all, when something's out of balance, you get a hunch about it. And the hunch is quite difficult for you to pick up. And you think, something's not quite right.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit...
I'm feeling, not quite right. I'll push on. And then you get a feeling. The next level is a feeling. You start to really become aware of what's going on, an emotion around it. And if we don't do something about it at that point, which most of us still don't, then we get a physical representation of that imbalance. Now that might be something like a muscle or joint problem. It might be, unfortunately, a disease, such as a cancer or a heart problem, like you said your friend was experiencing. But those potentially are just sort of end stage problems that have been in the field of the human body, if you like, the human spirit, for much longer, and just eventually manifest themselves as a physical problem. So how do we balance that? Well, we can then use all those bits that I just talked about to rebalance the frequency essentially in that area. So we can use thoughts to rebalance it. We can use movement and muscles to rebalance it. So we pick the area. For example, let's use the heart. The heart corresponds to the arm muscles, some of the arm muscles, also corresponds to the whole of the rest of the chest, the diaphragm, breathing,
Right.
the emotions of love.
Right.
So do I love my job, for example?
Right.
If this person that you were talking about hates his job at the moment because things are tough, is that being represented in his heart that's breaking his heart,
Right.
for example, to see his business like that?
Or in his case, he loved it, but is he taking that self-care? Is there an alignment then perhaps between the love of what you're doing and then that? Because then I would imagine that there'll be a discrepancy there.
Yeah.
So you could even be doing what you love. So what you're saying here is really, really powerful, and I think it makes sense for us to spend some time on these different levels, because I love the moment where you said, actually, let's look a little bit deeper about these particular things. So if we then zoom back to where we were before, so our starting point is about health and fitness in business. We may be so busy firefighting or with all the day-to-day stuff of what we're trying to achieve, or with the emails or with the calls, or trying to make this happen or to win more customers, that health may well not be that visible on our scale of our values, and it happens all the time, or it's being pushed down for some crazy reason. Bad choice of one to push down, first of all, it strikes me. I mean, is there anything you want to say, first of all, about that, Adam, that health, why is it that health isn't right at the top of our values? And it strikes me that we're in such a world where it's so much about the doing and becoming, that this thing about our health in the whole round of what you're talking about, this is why I really love sitting down and speaking to you, it's kind of pushed down. But perhaps if we were to look at it in the whole round, it wouldn't be so. So do you have any thoughts on that? Do you see that time and time again that it has been pushed down the list? I know that one of the things you do, for people who don't know, or this is the first interview they've seen with you, one of the areas you particularly specialise in is helping people to recover or recuperate after they've had injury and so on. Now that suggests a lot of the time that it has been pushed down, because of all of those signs that weren't spotted. So what's your take as a society? Do we have health in the right place in the positioning in our psyche and in our day-to-day lives, and importance of the way that you're talking about it?
It's an interesting question, and I think you'd have to answer that on a person-by-person basis.
Right.
You know, I think we touched on in our last conversation where I said, what would something like that mean to you? You know, what would health and well-being mean to you? It's going to represent different things for different people. So that's an important component of it. You know, for me, it might be being able to run a 10K at a certain pace, and you know, being free from aches and pains. For you, it might be you know, playing tennis. For somebody else, it might just be able to play with the kids or the grandkids or whatever. So it's very bespoke, depending on who you're talking to. One of the questions in there when you were talking was, why might it get pushed to the bottom of the pile? That is a pretty big question in terms of the answer to that could be multi-dimensional. But one thing, if I was to sort of pick one spoke on that and answer it, I would say that there's an incredible level of sort of underlying low-level stress, I think, in today's society. And that need, you're referring to there, that need to sort of push yourself into the future, to drive, I need to create this, I need to do that. Well, unfortunately, that creates, you know, we've all heard of the term, the fight-flight response. When we get into the fight-flight response, one of the primary things we need to remember is that that increases things like hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Now, increasing adrenaline and cortisol puts you in a very different frame of mind to when we're thinking in a relaxed state, an irrational state of I should be finishing work at this time, I need to rest for this long, I need to take some exercise, I need to spend some time with friends, whatever it might be. And you get into a very tunnel vision perspective. I've got to go and get these leads in. I've got to go and make some sales. I've got to turn over this amount of money this month. You know, the bank manager needs to see that you know, all these things are very kind of red alert, fight, flight state of mind. So in that state, do we then think, need to just go and have an hour's lunch break now, or, you know, I should really go down the gym now. It's time to go down the gym and just relax a little bit.
Yeah, or even just have a 5-minute break, or just I just feel as though I just need to shake up a little bit, just have a break. I'm feeling tired, and that's all suppressed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there's no time. There's one of my mentors said there's no time to do a cartwheel when you're running from a lion, and I love that. Because, you know, that 5-minute break is, you know, time to do the cartwheel,
right.
Definitely.
Right.
And a lot of us, unfortunately, whether we actually consciously are aware of that or not, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Until you come and see someone like myself or one of my colleagues or someone in the field, you're often not aware of actually how much stress you're under, because the high stress just becomes the norm.
Right.
And that's the dangerous bit.
That is the dangerous bit. One of the things I liked about one of the things you said before, Adam, was that when you were touching on the different components of health, is that, you know, it might well be, first of all, there might be a hunch, there might be an emotional kind of sense, and there might be a physical feeling. For some of the people who are actually watching this, I'd imagine one of the things that's quite interesting for them, some of them they will be quite, let's call it spiritually or intuitively switched on. And so I think one of the things, and it was also interesting talking about different frequencies you were talking about, I'd invite them to be mindful about perhaps which of those frequencies are more pronounced for them. Because if they can trust that particular level that they are perhaps tuned in on, it might well help them to spot that. So for example, for myself, I might far more in terms of how I feel, and maybe that's more in the intuitive sense of feeling than the physical sense of feeling initially. How do I feel about something? Then that's a spark. Because I think that what you're saying about all these different levels of it will really resonate with some people. And I'd say, are you negating that side of your own intuition, intuitiveness, intelligence of all these different things that are striking you? And I think that because we often only see health as this very physical thing, what am I eating today, and so on. This is part of the problem, isn't it? Yeah. We're not connected. We're not linking all these things together. So again, even the health stuff, it strikes me, is something, a chore. I need to get to the gym. I've got to do that now. I should be eating this now. So do you, I mean, and I guess a lot of your work is re-educating people around that. I mean, I wonder, what's your first thought for somebody who's listening to this, because we've already covered a lot of ground, and they think, okay, yeah, there's something here for me to be mindful of. For somebody who's perhaps tuning into some of these things for the first time, or they're feeling some dis-ease with themselves, what would be the first questions you might say to somebody who's listening to this and thinking, okay, there's something in what you're saying, but I'm not quite sure how to begin checking in with myself, or seeing how I feel, or beginning to address this health stuff because I'm busy, perhaps?
Yeah. The easiest way, very, very simple, is to keep a diary.
Right.
So a sleep diary, food diary, even, I know it's not the nicest thing to start talking about, but a diary of bowel movements, for example, because those sort of things will give you a great reflection on actually what your body is telling you.
Right.
Constipation, for example, is one sign of fight-flight.
Right.
So too is diarrhea or frequent bowel movements is another sign of fight-flight, opposite end of the scale. But
and also the sleep things that will come at you.
So if you're waking up feeling tired and unrefreshed, that's telling you that your adrenal glands are very tired. The adrenal glands being the gland that pumps out adrenaline and cortisol, the things that are supposed to get you going and feeling good in the morning. If you're waking up feeling groggy and needing a cup of coffee or something with caffeine in it to get you going, and it takes you until 10 in the morning to feel human again, you're definitely very tired. Are you going to be at your best when you're standing in front of people having to present, or with a potential new client, if you're feeling groggy and drowsy like that? Arguably not for the long term anyway. You might be able to get away with it for the short term. So keeping a diary of those things keeping a diary of what your food intake is, so you can see, am I skipping meals? Am I feeling, you know, less than my best when I've eaten certain things? It's a mirror, basically. A diary like that takes 2 seconds to fill out. You keep on your desk, or you can keep, you know, in a top drawer at home, so you can fill it out 2 minutes when you get home every night or whatever. Is a mirror.
Yeah.
Up in your face to
Right.
give you a reflection. Sometimes, you know, we don't see that reflection quite clearly enough.
We might be in denial of it, or block it, or kind of partly be aware of it, but not want to face up to it.
Part of us already knows the answers, and part
Yeah.
of us doesn't want to know the answers.
Yeah, so it's interesting what you're saying there, Adam, and I like that diary, especially if the awareness isn't as heightened toward it. I think that perhaps if you're more aware of it, you already have had those signs, and it might be far more, okay, now I need to really do something about it. I need to stop, I need to pause, I need to check, am I, you know, but if it's fresh, then I love that idea of that diary, because then, as you say, you can't hide from that information. You were saying something else there that I thought was really fascinating. You know, when you were talking about, you made the link between there, you know, if I don't address them, I'm feeling tired, then I'm not going to have the energy I need for that presentation, or for that pitch, or to get through the calls. Isn't it interesting? The thing that struck me is that sometimes it's only when we link it to the thing that is our priority that we suddenly wake up to it. Because I know that, for example, there'll be all sorts of people who could or should listen to something like this, will be too busy to, or who won't listen to it. That's, you know, that's absolutely fine. That's how it is. So, and it's interesting how sometimes it's only when you mention the thing that's really important to me now, the clients, or the this, or the pitch, or winning that piece of business, I suddenly wake up to stuff. I guess that's part of the human condition. I guess my question there is, what do you do when you see people who are very much out of sync, and they need to begin to go on this journey of looking at their health, but this thing about them being too busy happens, and it might be obviously before they become a client, or out and about, and they hear what you do, and they're curious, but they're too busy. Do you get that? Do people say that all the time? And can you tell me, how do you, not that it's your job to take the horse to water and make them drink, but how do you help people with that still, I'm too busy, I'd love to do this, Adam, and I'd love to spend more time on my health and well-being right now, but I'm too busy?
Well, there's, you know, a few answers to that question as well, as there is with most, but it comes down to, you know, when the need and the timing is right, it'll happen for somebody. That will be at different points for different people. So for somebody it might take, you know, an illness for them to really sit up and think, almost, you know, like a slap around the face almost. You know, whereas other people might be moved into action when they just feel less than their optimal best. And I, you know, I would fall into that category. I like to feel at my optimal best, so when I feel less than optimal, it's a kick up the backside for me to start doing something about, you know, tweaking what my diary looks like, as an example. So yeah, sorry, I missed the second part of your question.
Yeah, no, but that was a really good point, because I was saying that, you know, what would you say to those people who often say they're too busy? But I really liked how you began to point at that. You know, that different people have different points of that sometimes, and it's often, isn't it, where something very serious, it's ill health, or somebody else's ill health, or if it's for somebody else, it's more that they're aspirational, that the far more from a performance perspective. So it's good, again, what I like is you're pointing out these pointers that will help us to realise that that's it for me, or that's what's true for me. Anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, you know, what would it mean if someone said, "Oh, I'm too busy to do that"? You know, what does it look like for you to be too busy? You know, you could say, well, you know, I've got other priorities at the moment, and you know, that's an absolutely fair statement. Other people, you know, people do have different priorities at different times. So then you've got to then start to weigh up. Well, what's the upside of doing something about your health and well-being right now? What's the downside of it? What does the downside look like to you? What's the upside of what you're going to do instead? And what's the downside of what you're going to do instead? that's very superficial layer of where we're going with that. You can carry on going down and down and down, but what you get to see when you start to look at it like that is you get to see some core emotions. So what you might see is, if I focus on my health right now, the downside is I'm taking away from doing the day job as much as I need to do, as many hours as I need to spend on that, which means that I'm not going to produce the revenue that I should be producing, or the amount, the amount of clients coming in, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the downside of that? Well, I might go out of business. And what's the downside of that? I'll have no money. And what does that mean to you? That's very scary for me, Rashid. Okay, so what are we seeing now? We're seeing a fear response. So if I focus on my health and well-being, I'm scared that it will detract from the amount of money that I need to make or want to make. Interesting. So we have fear, potentially. We have fear at the root of that.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite a strong driving factor. And I don't think anything in the rational mind is ever going to convince somebody that if the emotion of fear is there,
Right.
you can say all of the rational things you like about why it's important to look after your health. But if the emotion of fear is there around money, essentially from the job, that's one of our most primal fears is security, money, security. So, whilst you have a security, a foundational issue like security or money, then unfortunately I think health or the sort of being optimal and expressing your optimal well-being, which lies much higher up on the tone scale, as we were referring to before, it's a bit like saying, we're going to start putting the roof on the house before we've put the walls up. This person's saying, I just need to get the foundations down. And we're saying, well, actually, a good house has always got a good roof.
Yeah.
No, the person's saying, I need to get the foundations down, so then I can get the walls up. Then we come into this part, this realization that a lot of people are constantly struggling to get the foundations down and never actually get the roof or the walls or the roof up.
It's interesting what you're saying, and it's very powerful. Now, I'm glad you took us there, because I'd imagine if that were the case, and I think it's the case in many cases, then again it might temporarily be useful to begin to look at health in the same way, because then what happens if we don't take care of ourselves? Well, I won't be able to do this, I won't be able to do that, I won't be able to get out of bed, and that may well be the only thing to first of all begin to create the balance that you're talking about. Well, then I won't be able to do that, I won't have the strength to do this, I won't be able to show up and do the pitch, or what have you. This is it's profound. Yeah, you can add. Yeah.
Well, I'm just I think it's a good point to summarise and say what you see right now is that health and well-being is not just running around the park, lifting some weights, doing yoga, Pilates, swimming, eating better food, all that stuff. If we're just addressing it from that perspective, are we really going to make any difference?
Yeah, I agree with you.
No, I don't think so. It's the foundational emotions, the mental attitude towards these things. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination, by the way, saying that these things are easy to correct, because we may have patterns of belief and thought patterns that go way, way back into our childhood, for example. So, to be able to really give someone a holistic understanding, a holistic benefit to their health and well-being, we need to understand the whole person. It's not just the physical body that's walking into a coaching session. It's the whole person that's walking in, and we need to look at that person.
So much, and so much so, and I think it's interesting. As that whole person considering this, as we step back, there was something that you said before that I kind of wanted to comment on, because I thought it was very, very powerful. That scenario, for example, the person that I need to, right now, that my priority is this rather than my health, because I need to do this, it's fundamentally important. I think you ask this question sometimes, is that completely true. And what I mean by that is that sometimes there's that notion. I remember years ago when I used to be employed, many years ago, and I worked in a very, very busy environment, and I equated, of course, long hours with productivity, and that's still, I think, a bit of the default in some things. You know, you do very long hours, you have a short lunch break, and that equates to productivity. And so I didn't, for example, I'd often not take lunch breaks, but I'd noticed that after about 11, because I'd come in very early, I wasn't very productive between 11 and about 3:30. So as an entrepreneur, that's nonsensical if I stop and I think about it. It's not true that just working long hours and not taking a break is going to lead me to better business outcomes.
Well, you know what, there was a Harvard study done on this, and it showed clearly that if you work more than 8 hours in a day, the following day you're less productive.
Right.
So if you do 10 hours today, and 10 hours tomorrow, and 10 hours the next day, by day 5 you are way less productive.
Right.
So you're better off. Oh, in the long term,
Yeah.
yeah, you might say, well, yeah, but I just got to get stuff done today.
Yeah.
You know, I need to do a 12-hour day. Fine, do your 12, 14-hour day. But research shows us that you're going to need to take the following day off, and the third day get back to it, and you'll be far more productive. That's kind of very clear
It's
in
clear,
the
isn't
research.
it?
So,
Well, isn't it clear?
So
Yeah.
people will sort of argue with that until, you know, the blood spurting out their eyes, but
Yeah.
the facts are the facts, and that is that, you know, your biology is designed in a certain way through thousands and thousands of years of evolution that, you know, we're not designed to slog for long periods of time.
Before we close,
Week on week.
Right, before we close, and I think we could talk about so much more, I want to talk about the thing that you had introduced a while ago, which was the far more holistic picture of health. And what I want to propose to the Soul Trader, S-O-U-L, is that as we begin to explore the health that you've brought back into our consciousness, there can be far more. Let's look at the flip side of how effective one's business can be. I was just thinking about this a while ago in terms of my own business. I was thinking a little bit about how I work in business, and I was considering a little bit about when things happened in terms of my business. So in other words, I realised that actually that there are certain key moments in my business. As I look at my business for a month, for example, as long as certain things are done, the outcomes will be made. It doesn't matter when in the month that is. So if somebody's employed, there may well be a certain setup, Monday to Friday, and this is the particular structure. Once you're your own boss, that is not necessarily the case at all. And you need to understand what the outcomes that you need for your business is, the stuff that you're talking about in terms of your overall well-being, and then energetically how you work best. And I think what I love about the other dimensions you talk about health and well-being is that for somebody who's, for example, intuitive, or lots of people who are watching this, they will be healers, they will be creatives and so on. They may well be negating those other aspects that relate to their health and their well-being and their productivity that they might otherwise be negating. So I love what you're presenting in terms of this broader picture of health, because then suddenly they actually may well be far more effective in business. So I want to ask you maybe personally on this. How do you, Adam, as somebody who runs their own business and you're passionate about what you do, how do you balance the doing the business, and I know you're very dedicated to all the stuff that you do. What's your particular take? How do you ensure that you're doing the stuff you need to the business, but also that you're doing the things that you need to do for Adam? What's your take on this? Because of course you'll be more mindful about it than many of us. How do you balance this?
Well, I actually do the diary thing.
Yeah.
First and foremost, yeah. I keep an active eye out on those sorts of things, and I very much, I've got to the point, and I'm not saying this is right to start off with, but I've got to the point for myself where I respond and alter my schedule based on how I'm feeling on any particular day.
Me too. Yeah.
So, it might be the fact that I wake up and need to rearrange some appointments because I'm in a position where I am one-on-one with people, and so I need to be at my best because you know, we were talking about energy fields, and energy fields reach out further than the physical body. So I'm in someone's energy field all day, every day. So anybody that works in a profession where you're in someone's energy field, i.e. within about 3 feet of them.
And that's going to be so many people watching this ad, and what you're saying now is going to chime with them.
So if you are drained, you know, less healthy than you would like to be, you're actually taking charge, literally charge, from the other person and drawing down on them. And you know, if that's a potential new customer for some people, that's not going to feel great for the new potential customer. So the you know, the customer who's coming to help to you for help should always be at least one rung on the ladder below you, shouldn't they? In that sort of sense. Yeah. Otherwise, you know, potentially they're just they're at the same level.
Especially if you're doing anything around healing, helping people in those levels, because that's what they're coming to in a way, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you know, you don't set off up the side of the mountain with a mountain guide that's never been up to the top before, do you? Right. You go off with the guy that's been up there several times and knows where all the pitfalls are.
This is, you know what, Adam, what you're saying here, I think is so powerful, because I think that anybody, as you said, anybody who's in any profession, doing any business where you're working one-on-one with people, especially at close, and it could be anything from you're providing them a professional service to healing, coach, therapist, any of those things, and probably far more in between. This is really important, and if you haven't taken care of that, then you're going to be underperforming. And I would add, as a coach, as a life and business coach, what's then also the impact, not just in terms of you being fit enough to do your day-to-day work, but what's the impact if you're not at that space, if you haven't got that awareness, then all the times where you haven't won the pitch, where you haven't won that piece of business, where you haven't been able to engage with them, we haven't been able to win them over, and you might think it's due to all sorts of other factors, have you considered that, if you like, spiritual, that emotional, that broader impact? And I think what you're saying here is really huge, and it really resonates with me, because that's exactly how I run my business. How do I feel today? And sometimes what I love as a win from it, just to share, is that when I stop and I feel, how do I feel today? Suddenly my whole diary opens up. I mean, it does depend on the nature of your business and how stuff comes in, but I realise far more than being just reactive to business, it's completely different. And I'm actually able to work in a completely different way. I often have more time than I thought.
In your peak flow.
In my complete peak flow.
Yeah, I mean, I have a form that I use, and it's a very simple form. And you know, to give you some idea, I have the form is split up into physical representation of how I'm doing, hormonal representation, and then limbic, so emotional, mental emotional. It takes 2 seconds to fill this form out, and at the end you get a score. Now, if I'm in the high box for any or all of those, I know that today's a day to do some Tai Chi for my exercise regime. For my work practice, it might be that I need to rearrange some appointments, to do some paperwork instead of seeing clients one-on-one, you know, to do some emails instead of making phone calls where it's going to be obvious that my energy's not where it needs to be. Whereas the day when, you know, my scores are low and I've done my Tai Chi maybe the day before and I've had a great night's sleep and I've eaten really well and all these things, that's the day to do my, you know, hard exercise program. That's the day to get up a little bit earlier. That's the day to do some more one-on-one appointments, face-to-face, whatever it might be. So, you know, what we find is that life it ebbs and flows. Well, across a lifetime, it ebbs and flows, but you also have an ebb and flow within your year, within your month, within your week, and within your day. And so if we can be mindful of how those ebbs and flows flow for us, we get the most authentic version of ourselves in business, in life.
I love what you've said there, and I think this is really nicely beginning to draw us to a close. I think what you say there is so powerful. And I would add, you know, very often as a coach, I often say that I notice with people in their business, lots of stuff falls down in terms of what they're doing in the day-to-day. And that's because it falls down because of because of often not that awareness in the whole round of all the stuff that it is that you're talking about. Sorry, I've just clearly set something off in my pocket. Let's
Siri's talking to
exactly.
us. It's time to wrap up.
Yeah, saying it's time to wrap up, exactly. But it's really, really powerful. And I think that sometimes, when you talk about the hunch thing, before you know all these different elements, so what's the hunch, and then what's the emotional, what's physical, and all these things telling you. And very often I think what's happened is that people have this notion of how they need to work productivity-wise, which is often does not take account of them personally in all the round of all those things. So they're trying to impose something that isn't apt for them on them without this kind of awareness. So what you're saying helps us to rebalance that awareness. I loved what you were saying there, because I noticed it for myself and with clients, to begin to get them to work out what works for you. What is it that ultimately you need to achieve in your business? What is it you need to achieve per month, per week, per day, and so on? And you can completely change the way that you work based on that. And I loved that thing that you said, do I feel right now, is it time for calls, is it time for that? And I had this experience just earlier on today. On paper there are a few things I need to do. It's quite a nice day because some things didn't happen in my diary today. But then my energy was telling me, and my energy was, as it often is, in a place where doing stuff like this is very natural. I was going to record a podcast. More creative, very natural, very easy. So I think that, Adam, what you're saying is just absolutely fantastic, because I think what you've done here is given breadth and breadth and space for people to really consider these particular kind of themes. I wonder if you might begin to wrap up for us. I know we've covered a lot of ground, but are there any top tips or pointers that you just want to say for somebody who's watched this? I know we've covered so much, but just to say...
That's a summary.
Could you, the summary ends up being longer than that.
Come back for part 11.
But is there anything you want to just say, just in terms of just things for people to watch out for? So they've listened to this. You've talked about the health in the round, but any just pointers just to recap for people, just to help them check in, or to take this further, or to look into it further should they want to?
Well, we spoke last time about my 5R approach to health, well-being. And
we're now going to have to mention that for people who didn't watch it. So give us those 5 R's.
I will. So we got reconnect, R1, rebalance, realign, rebuild, and recover. So if I kind of summarise it by giving you sort of using that framework, I would say reconnect, meaning reconnect with yourself, the authentic version of you.
I'm smiling.
Then I would say answer the question, what does health and well-being mean to you?
Love it.
What does it mean to you? That's where you start from when it comes to designing your health and well-being program.
Like it.
Not, should I do the latest class down the gym? What's the latest fad piece of equipment? None of that, unfortunately, because that would be easy.
Yeah, should I start standing up now because people have told me because I'm sat behind my desk? That's not deep enough.
No, exactly. What does it mean to you? Answer that question. I think you're going to get a lot of insight on what you need to do for you if you can just answer that question. So that was reconnect. Rebalance. The diary idea was a great example of what you can do to tune into the rebalance section. So what is it? What's your sleep telling you? What's your nutrition telling you? What's your mindset telling you to some degree?
So then presumably there's some simple things I can do. Okay, I need that little bit more sleep. Okay, I need to bring a little bit more veg back into my diary, and those kind of things. So really simple things like that. Or I need to just do a little bit more movement exercise, like negated going to the gym or going for a walk and so on. You can begin to do some of that rebalancing and work, especially if it's day to day or what have you.
Absolutely. Posture. Get someone to quickly ask you, quickly sort of tell you what they think your posture's like. Are you getting backache when you sat down at the computer? So that's realign. Do we need to do some postural work? Do we need to set up the computer differently when we're working on it?
That's a nice visual one, isn't it, in terms of realign? So again, you've given them a nice way, so that's a good check-in, isn't it? So as well as the physical thing, you can actually check, am I? Right.
Rebuild, when we get to rebuild, we're talking more about traditional forms of exercise, and obviously the 3 other components need to be in place before we get to rebuild. So are we lifting weights, are we running, are we all those kind of components. And if I'm doing none of those things, am I in a position to do any of those things first and foremost?
Right, okay.
Am I fit enough to even start doing that?
Yeah.
Or do I need to start at a much lower intensity?
And presumably that might be where, depending where they are on that rebuild and process, that might be where for some people, particularly if they're not that where that you need to see a specialist, and there could be any specialist anywhere on the spectrum that people might well see as apt to them, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And again, tune into your frequencies to find out what that feels like for you, isn't it? Is it about me going to a doctor? Is it me going to see an expert like Adam who's going to help me with my health? Is it more about this? Is it more about that? Is it more that I'm well enough to do blah blah? So I love that rebuild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then with the recover component, if I've started exercising by this time, am I recovering from my exercise?
Mm-hmm.
Am I so sore? And am I bringing on shoulder pain or back pain or whatever I'm doing with my exercise program? If I am, there's something in the prior 4 stages that are not in place. I would say, in my opinion. You know, so we might want to take a step back 1, 2 or 3 stages to make sure that we've got the foundations in place before we can then use that rebuild, recover cycle. Right. Once we've built the foundations of the first 3, so reconnect, rebalance and realign, once we've got that, then you kind of cycle that rebuild, recover, and that's what we were talking about with the ebb and flow.
Yeah, and I love that because what you've already presented from these R's is that from that reconnect, you're reconnecting that person to their own awareness, that their own ability to master, and their own awareness of their own health and well-being, and to be able to tune in and to check and to moderate becomes awakened again, which is beautiful. Yeah,
because you know, I'm keen to sort of get the message out there that, like we said, the physical body is just the most dense form of your human being. You've got the other energy fields that is now, you know, can be proven by science that there are other energetic fields of the human being. So when we start to deal with the mental and the and more emotional sides of things, we're sort of embracing the more spiritual components out here as well, which is more than just the physical, but heavily influences the physical. So
the R's. So we did rebuild,
reconnect, rebalance, realign, rebuild, and recover.
And then recover. Okay, so recover. You know, Adam, I just want to thank you so much. It's always just such a pleasure. Every time I sit down with you, there's so much richness of insight, knowledge, and common sense, and deep insight. That kind of deep insight that kind of awakens one's own inner knowing. That's one of the reasons why I really loved speaking to you here, and I think it will really chime with many soul traders who are on that journey, and perhaps there's also those different levels of that knowledge, and that I think that for many of them you've really encouraged them not to just rely on the physical signals alone, and to trust all of those other layers of their knowingness and to incorporate them, because that might well be where some of the rebalancing actually needs to be done. Thank you so much. If people are trying to find you, what's the best way that we can find you?
My website, movementlifestyle.com.
Movementlifestyle.com.
It's
easy, nice and easy, I can spell that.
Yeah, easy to spell, and there's a little blog on there, and there's also
people can find you on Twitter.
Form. There's Twitter, Adam Movement Life. And there's Twitter feeds. Like I said, the contact form on the website as well, if anyone wants to ask any further questions.
Thank you very much for that brief 15-minute interview that we said we were going to do. But no, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I'm going to leave you to smile at the camera as I turn off the camera, and thank you so much.
Thank you for.
Before I do go, I just want to say, you know, just personally, if people are on this journey and you're wanting to explore more, I would really highly recommend you. I'd work with you myself, and I think that the work that you do, both with your clients and educationally, is really outstanding, and it really does chime with me, which is why I'm always keen for these kind of interviews to interview you. So thank you very much.
I really appreciate
that. And on behalf of those people you're helping, thank you.